Um, in this video I will try to be ruthlessly honest. And I don't know who is talking, if it's just this empirical me or if it's a higher principle. I don't know, but I will say what this empirical me thinks about Europe. And when I say I will speak as this me. I love Europe passionately. And if I check on the internet the meaning of the word passionately, I see in a passionate manner, with strong feeling, ardently, angrily, irascibly, in a stormy or violent manner. So the passion is also the crucifixion of Christ. And um, I was wondering what idea could help me bear the burden of being crucified. If I were crucified, what would I think about in order to preserve my being, in a way, to make me go through the fires of Mordor, as Aragorn said? What is the noblest idea that would keep me alive in the darkest moments? And this idea is the idea of Europe. And what do I mean when I think about Europe? I will be honest. When I was this empirical individual, when I was 15 years old, I fell in love passionately with a girl. She was 16 years old. She was very beautiful, very attractive, very funny. She was, of course, European. She was French, but of probably Germanic descent. But she was I think she was blonde, but she had her hair black. She dyed her hair, but she was extremely beautiful, kind, funny. She was a little bit. She had character also, and I was passionately in love, and I believe that she liked me also. I was much less ugly then than I am now, and we were in love, and it was heaven on earth. And yeah, and that is the in the empirical world. This is my view of Europe. This innocent, passionate, absolute love between two European kids, because when you're 15 or 16, you're still a kid, you're a teenager, you're not yet an adult. So this is romantic, passionate love. And then in my intellectual journey many years later, I realized by exploring the darkest aspects of the European thought. I made a video about the list of the men that I have admired, and I have admired some of the worst criminals imaginable. But I realized that the idea for which they were fighting for, and for which they had devoted their lives and committed crimes, was an idea of higher beauty, higher nobility, higher greatness. And I had an experience. It was probably 2018, or I don't remember exactly. I thought about Hitler, and I realized that the reason why I admired at this moment Hitler is because, as an empirical individual, I had lacked my father. I missed my father because he died when I was 3.5 years old. So I never knew him, and I always felt a lack of a strong father figure. So I realized that the only reason why I had admired Hitler, which was and still is the most despised human ever, is because he represented the strong father figure. That was just a psychological problem that I had. And when I understood that, I ceased to admire Hitler. I had aufgehoben Hitler, in a sense that I had acknowledged that it was a moment in my psychological and intellectual development, but that I should not be ashamed of having admired him at a certain moment in my life, but I should move on and keep evolving. And so, yeah. And Europe means to me, it begins with a deep feeling of love for a girl, a European girl. And then it has transformed into a quest for the search of the absolute. I realized this also in 2017, that all my intellectual efforts, my intellectual journey, were just an unconscious attempt of reconstructing in the realm of thought, because I knew that in the empirical realm it was over. I would never be with her again. And yeah, so I tried to reconstruct intellectually the love I had for this girl when I was a teenager. And I did not do it consciously. It was the path of consciousness which has led me there. And that the most noble idea of Europe that I have found was in the writings of Alfred Rosenberg, the ideologue of National Socialism. And he says that what Schiller, the German poet, praised in Goethe is what Rosenberg envisioned for Europe, namely the depth of feeling and tenderness. But it has to be balanced by a certain ruthlessness. You cannot have deep love without ruthlessness, because if you really care and love something or care about something, you must be willing to defend and to fight and to protect and to kill for the sake of the person or the thing or the idea that you love. So it must be balanced by a certain ruthlessness. And yeah. And in my later intellectual developments, it was the early month of 2018. I already had a glimpse of what I called the absolute, and I started to say that if what I call Europe, the most noble ideas of beauty, honor, truth, goodness, tenderness, beauty, simply beauty, if what I call Europe as an idea is what the Christians call Christ as an idea, not the historical Jesus who died on the cross, but as a principle, then I said to myself, then if this is Christ, if my vision of Europe is the Christian's vision of Christ, then I am a Christian. And but Christ, the way I envision it, must not be an empty principle. It must be filled with all the highest, most noble thoughts that you have. And as an empirical individual, I love Europeans passionately, which means with hatred also, because I love Europeans more than anything else. And I will put the link of a video by Slavoj Žižek who says that love is evil, and a song by Eminem which says love is evil, spell it backward, I'll show you. Because when you love something more than something else, it means that you reject something else, you negate, you leave aside, you abandon in a way. So a real wise person should love everything equally. But I am not yet wise, and I have in this individual a strong love for Europe, and I love Europe more than anything else. And I love its intellectuals, its great men, the beauty of the European women, the character of Europeans, the intelligence, the will, the nobility, the aristocratic values, all that is worth loving about Europe. But I'm also aware that in a way I hate Europe, because Europe, as I envision it, constantly reminds me of my own mediocrity, my own ugliness, my own lack of will, my own wickedness. So I have this bipolar relationship, because And this is very Hegelian, because I project onto Europe all the qualities, all the beauties, all the nobility, all the honors that I wish I had. And the more I think about the beautiful, the more I realize how ugly and pathetic I am. So it's I also understand from a logical standpoint that the beauty can only exist in relation to the ugly, and the noble to the wicked, the honorable to the dishonorable. They are in a dialectical relationship. So I love Europe because it stands for everything worthy of being loved and praised and admired, and I have an infinite love for Europe, but also at the same time I hate Europe because the way I envision Europe, it constantly reminds me of my own failures and my own wickedness. And uh, it's all good to say, oh, Europe represents, among other things, courage and a will to self-sacrifice and the greater good of the community. But when you say that, how many people are willing to sacrifice themselves and abandon their own individuality for the sake of a higher principle? Because everyone admires courage and virtue, but the reason why it's so admired is because it is so rare. How many people are willing to self-negate for the sake of a higher principle? And the only proud achievement that I have achieved in my life was an introductory process of self-negation. And the only pride that I have about myself is that I have endured a little bit of pain and I have not complained. And when I was screaming in pain after an accident, if I wanted to make a joke, I would say it was an accident of the substance. That's a Spinozian joke. The only pride that I have is that I self-negated partly, and I overcome the negative, and I loved Nietzsche when I was lying on the floor and screaming in pain. I screamed, I love Nietzsche, because to love the pain is a Nietzschean endeavor, and that's the only moment of pride that I have in me as an empirical individual, is the ability to partly overcome the pain by thinking about noble ideas. So yeah. So to conclude, I will say that I will crucify myself, or I will be crucified, and to overcome the suffering, to transcend the suffering, I will think as strongly as I can about the most noble ideas, most noble thoughts I ever had. And these are about Europe. And like I said, my view of Europe is what people call Christ. So for me, they are one. And I accept my own evil in the sense that I love Europe more than anything else, which means anything else is less important to me than Europe. And since I have a total view of reality, I have a totalitarian view of reality, I know that the rest, the things that I love less than Europe, will come back at me to haunt me and to force me to accept them as being part of the totality that I am trying to incorporate into my own thoughts. So I have said what I have to say, and I will conclude by saying that I will try to unite Europe spiritually. I will devote my efforts with my limited capabilities to bringing about the spiritual unification of Europe, and I have broad ideas of how I'm going to do it. And yeah, so I conclude by saying that I love Europe passionately, and check the meaning of the word and you will understand my relation to Europe.